These hieroglyphs reveal why the moon is the exact size to cover the and who set it. There is a limestone block sitting in the basement storage of the Cairo Museum that has not been shown to the public since 1973. It is not behind glass. It is not on a tour route. It sits cataloged as JE89289, and what is carved on its face does not match anything in the entire known Egyptian religious canon. The people who found it in 1971 knew that immediately. The excavation leader, Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer, a man who spent more than 7 decades working at Saqqara and who is considered one of the foremost authorities on that site, wrote in his field notes that the sealed chamber where the block was discovered predated the surrounding step pyramid complex not by years, but by centuries. The stratigraphic analysis placed its construction before the accepted beginning of dynastic Egypt. The Cairo Museum cataloged the block in 1974 under one line: pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain. No dedicated iconographic study has been published since. And buried in what is carved on that block is the beginning of an answer to a question that modern astrophysics cannot fully explain. A question that, once you hear it stated plainly, you will never be able to look at the night sky the same way again. The moon is 400 times smaller than the Sunday. The sun is 400 times farther away from Earth than the moon, which means that from the surface of this planet, those two bodies appear to be exactly the same size in the sky. Not approximately. Exactly. Precisely. With enough mathematical accuracy that during a total solar eclipse, the moon covers the sun's disk so perfectly that only the corona becomes visible. The probability of this occurring by gravitational coincidence in a randomly assembled solar system is, by any serious calculation, vanishingly small. And 4 ancient civilizations, writing in different languages, on different continents, at different periods of history, each recorded in their own way that this was not an accident, that someone placed the moon there deliberately, that the perfect celestial alignment humanity calls a solar eclipse was not nature, it was a signature. If that interests you, subscribe right now. Every week on this channel we go directly to the source documents, the field notes, the catalog numbers, and the suppressed translations that mainstream academics never discuss. And what we find keeps pointing in the same direction. Now let us build this case from the ground up, starting in Egypt, moving through Babylon, crossing into the Book of Enoch, and arriving at a conclusion that 4 separate ancient records agree on, even though no one sat down and coordinated them. The limestone block JE89289 has a carved register on its face that depicts a construction sequence. Not a religious offering scene, not a funerary procession, a construction sequence. Figures directing the placement of large rectangular stone forms using instruments that do not correspond to any tool in the documented Egyptian archaeological record. One instrument appears repeatedly throughout the register. It is a rod with a forked terminus, held at a precise downward angle by each figure shown using it. For decades, any researcher who encountered this image in Lauer's documentation assumed it was a ritual object, a ceremonial implement. The object was classified as unknown, filed, and the inquiry stopped. But that assumption rested on a comparison set that was missing a critical data point. In the year 2000, German archaeologist Dr. Klaus Schmidt published a field report documenting his ongoing excavations at Göbekli Tepe, a site in southeastern Turkey recognized as the oldest known ritual complex on Earth, predating the Egyptian pyramid complex by at least 7,000 years. Among the carved limestone pillars, Schmidt documented what is now called Pillar 43, the vulture stone. In his field notes, Schmidt logged one recurring abstract element: a forked rod held at a downward angle by a figure rendered without a head. He classified it as an unidentified cultic implement and moved on. There is no evidence in any published record that Schmidt was ever aware of. JE89289 sitting in the Cairo Museum basement. He was not looking for a parallel. He found one anyway. In 2017, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, whose doctorate is from Yale and whose peer-reviewed work on the geological age of the Sphinx enclosure has been a subject of serious academic debate for 3 decades, presented an analysis at the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America. His finding was this: the forked rod on Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe appears multiple times across the carved surface, and in every instance it is rendered at a consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal. The forked implement carved on JE89289 in Cairo appears at the same angle, 33 degrees. 2 sites separated by 7,000 years and 2,000 kilometers. The same instrument, the same angle. No known cultural transmission pathway connecting them. But here is what makes JE89289 specific to the question of the moon. The beings depicted on that block are labeled in the carved register with a compound hieroglyphic glyph that Egyptologists have translated provisionally as those who came before the counting of years. In hieroglyphic convention, compound glyphs of that grammatical construction are not poetic flourishes. They are precise categorical designations. The Egyptians used them to name specific classes of beings, specific offices, specific cosmic roles. This glyph does not appear anywhere in the formal dynastic canon. And the construction sequence those beings are depicted overseeing is not a building on the ground. The sequence shows placement upward, figures oriented toward the sky, instruments angled not toward the earth but toward the heavens. In 1973, the visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago, who photographed a section of the block's surface, wrote in her own notes that the beings depicted had no equivalence in any dynastic text she had encountered in 20 years of fieldwork. And then she noted something that never made it into any publication. The glyph sequence above the construction scene included a symbol she identified as Aya, the Egyptian word for moon, combined with a placement determinative she had seen only once before in a single papyrus fragment from Deir el-Medina, not in a religious text but in an inventory entry, the kind of administrative language scribes used for recording the delivery of objects to a specific location. The moon as an object to be placed, not worshipped, not observed, placed. Now we need to go to Babylon, because Egypt is not the only civilization that recorded this. In October 1924, a junior excavator named Tariq Farouk was working a quadrant at the Royal Cemetery of Ur in southern Iraq, 12 feet below the surface of a dig site that had already produced enough extraordinary objects to fill 3 museum halls. He set a small clay tablet on a tray without looking at it. Leonard Woolley picked it up an hour later and did not put it down for 40 minutes. What made Woolley go still was the script itself. Every other tablet from that layer was written in a form of Sumerian his team could read without difficulty. This one was not. The symbols were older, not by decades, by centuries at minimum. A tablet written in a script that predated the civilization it was buried inside was not something that should exist. Woolley called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 seasons of excavation records, then stops. The tablet does not appear in any published catalog from the Ur excavations. It is not in the British Museum. It is not in the Iraq Museum. No accession number has ever been assigned to it. A photograph taken by Woolley's assistant in 1924 shows a clay tablet on a linen cloth, partially obscured by shadow. The caption reads, "Not for reproduction." The first person known to have translated any portion of the Anzu fragment was a linguist at the Oriental Institute in Chicago named Harold Spicer. In 1938, he received a rubbing of the tablet through a private channel he never identified. He spent 18 months on it. His notes survive in the Oriental Institute archive under a folder marked Miscellaneous Correspondence, a label that suggests someone at some point decided they should not be easy to find. Those notes contain 12 pages of partial translation, several diagrams of astronomical configurations, and a single sentence written in the margin of the final page in a hand that appears more agitated than his earlier entries. It reads, "If this date is correct, it has already been set. He published nothing. He retired in 1949. The Anzu fragment's text is written entirely in past tense. Not the conditional grammar of Babylonian omen literature. Not if the moon is surrounded by a halo, the king will die. Testimony. The grammar of a witness. The author describes a moment when the sky underwent a change. The Sumerian compound used to describe the event translates, in the reading developed by Dr. Helena Voss at the Oriental Institute in 2018, as the fixing of the lesser light. An is sky, Ud is light. Near means lesser, or subordinate. And gal, in this grammatical context, means set into position, the same verb used in Sumerian administrative texts to describe the placement of a boundary stone or a foundation peg at a construction site. The lesser light was set into position. The author describes observers watching the lesser light move into a position from which it could cover the greater light completely, and then stop there. The author's language for that moment is the same language used in Sumerian astronomical texts to describe a perfect fit between a seal and its impression, designed correspondence, the lid matched to its vessel. And then the author writes something that Voss flagged as the most unexpected line in the entire surviving text. Those who set the lesser light into position left a mark on its face. A visible record carved into the sphere itself that those with knowledge would recognize as a signature. Now the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic preserved on 7 clay tablets discovered at Nineveh and now held at the British Museum, dedicates a significant portion of Tablet 5 to the creation of the moon. The standard translation renders the relevant passage as Marduk creating the moon to mark time, to serve as a lamp in the night sky. A straightforward cosmological utility. But Tablet 5 contains a word in the original Akkadian that the standard translation renders as appointed and leaves there. The word is shimatu, and in every other place it appears across the Akkadian corpus, its meaning is specific: to set in place according to a plan already determined, to position according to a prepared blueprint, not to create spontaneously, to execute a pre-existing design. In Tablet 5, verse 12, Marduk looks at the moon after placing it, and the text says he confirmed that its position matched the measurement. A specific measurement that preceded the placement. The moon was not created and then observed. It was placed to satisfy a specification. The Babylonian text and the Saqqara hieroglyphs are describing the same act in different theological vocabularies. An intentional placement of the moon at a distance, and size calibrated to produce an exact visual correspondence with the sun as seen from the surface of Earth. Tablet 5 also records that the moon was not the first body placed. The sun came first. The moon was positioned in deliberate relationship to a body that was already there. The lesser light was calibrated to the greater. Whoever set the moon in place already knew the size and distance of the sun, calculated the necessary parameters to produce an exact apparent equivalence, and then executed that placement. That is not mythology. That is an engineering specification. Now we open the Book of Enoch, and this is where it stops being ancient theology and starts requiring careful attention to the actual text. A fragment of parchment, no bigger than a business card, sits in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Catalog number 4, Q203. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. For 17 centuries it was banned, hidden, called too dangerous for Christian teaching. When archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 at Qumran, 11 separate copies of Enoch turned up, more than most books that made it into the Old Testament. The Book of Enoch, chapters 72 through 82, is called the Astronomical Book. This is the oldest section of the Enoch corpus. Fragments found at Qumran date to approximately 200 BCE. It also gets the least attention in popular discussions of Enoch because it reads less like supernatural narrative and more like a technical manual. Chapter 72 opens with an angel named Uriel showing Enoch the laws of the heavenly bodies. Not the mythology of those bodies, the laws, the precise numerical relationships governing their movement. Chapter 73 describes the moon's size in relationship to the sun using a fractional measurement, and in the same passage Uriel explains that the moon is positioned at a specific distance such that the difference in disk size is compensated, producing equal apparent measurements from the Earth's surface during conjunction. The Ethiopian Ge'ez manuscripts held at Aksum, which contain the most complete version of the astronomical book, include a verse in chapter 73 that does not appear in abbreviated Western versions. The verse reads, in Dr. Ephraim Isaac's 1983 Oxford translation, and Uriel said to me, this arrangement was prepared before the days of the earth, and the one who set the lamp in its place knew the measure of the great fire it would stand before. The placement of the moon was prepared before the earth existed, and whoever placed it understood the exact specifications of the sun before the moon was set in position. This is the same sequence Babylonian Tablet 5 describes: sun first, moon position to specification. The same sequence the Saqqara hieroglyphs depict, beings oriented upward, placing something into the sky using instruments carried at precise angles. 3 separate ancient records describing the same event in 3 different languages. But Enoch goes further, because Enoch names the entities who had knowledge of celestial mechanics. Chapter 69 lists 20 leaders among the Watchers and describes what each one taught humanity after they descended to Earth. What matters here is not the theological framing of that descent. What matters is the catalog of knowledge those beings possessed. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, solar cycles, and timekeeping. Sariel taught the course of the moon, lunar phases, and calendars. Asardel taught the motion of the moon, specifically what the text calls orbital mechanics. Kokabeel taught the constellations, the patterns of the heavens. Tomiel taught astronomy, the structure of the cosmos. These knowledge domains are not random. They are precisely the disciplines required to calculate, plan, and execute the placement of a body like the moon at a specific orbital distance to produce a specific geometric relationship to a much larger body at a much greater distance. You need solar cycle knowledge to understand the sun's size. You need lunar orbital mechanics to calculate the required distance. You need constellation patterns to fix the reference frame. Together, these disciplines form the exact engineering toolkit for the project described on the Saqqara block and in Tablet 5 of the Enuma Elish. The Watchers did not teach humanity random magic. They transmitted the specific technical disciplines required to understand how the moon got where it is, and chapter 18 of Enoch adds something that does not fit any conventional reading of this text as religious allegory. Enoch writes, "I saw the winds which turned the sky, and caused the disk of the sun and all the stars to set." He is describing atmospheric and celestial mechanics from a specific observational perspective. This is not mythology. This is observational astronomy framed in the only vocabulary available to a writer in 200 BCE. Now, the question that every one of these sources is circling without fully stating in modern terms is this: why does it matter that the moon covers the sun exactly? Astronomer Neil deGrasse Tyson described the perfect eclipse geometry as the most spectacular coincidence in our solar system. Carl Sagan referenced it in Cosmos. The mathematics are straightforward. The sun's diameter is 1.392 million kilometers. The moon's diameter is 3,474 kilometers. The sun is approximately 401 times larger than the moon. The sun is approximately 390 times farther from Earth than the moon. During eclipse totality, the match is so precise that the moon can cover the sun's photosphere completely while leaving the corona exposed. Other planets have moons. Jupiter has 95. Saturn has 146. None of them produce total solar eclipses from their host planet's surface where the moon precisely covers the sun. The geometry is unique to Earth. And here is what the ancient texts understood that we have collectively stopped taking seriously. If you wanted a sentient species standing on a planetary surface to be able to determine the exact size of its star without any instrument other than their own eyes and the moon's silhouette during eclipse, the moon's placement makes that possible. During totality, you can measure the corona, calculate the sun's diameter, and derive the fundamental constants of your solar system using only what you can observe with naked eyes. The moon functions as a precision astronomical instrument, calibrated, positioned, accurate. The Egyptian word used in the Deir el-Medina papyrus for the placement instrument that also appears as the determinative on JE 89289 translates, as closely as cognate Semitic root structures allow, as the thing that turns, not a tool for building, a tool for measuring, a rotating measurement apparatus. And the beings depicted on JE 89289 are using it while orienting themselves upward, toward the sky. They were not building a pyramid, they were calibrating a position. Here is where the four records converge on a single answer to the question of who. The beings depicted on JE 89289, labeled as those who came before the counting of years, using the precision placement instrument oriented toward the sky, are the earliest Egyptian record of the class of entities that every subsequent ancient civilization described. In Babylon, they appear in the Enuma Elish as the Anunnaki, who executed the placement specifications. Tablet 6 describes them as those who labored at the tasks of heaven and earth, specifically those who prepared the positions of the celestial bodies before the age of human time. In the Book of Enoch, they appear as the Watchers, the beings who descended and transmitted the knowledge of the heavens, whose imprisonment is recorded in chapter 21, at a depth the text specifies as 70,000 leagues beneath the Earth's surface, 210,000 miles down, deeper than the distance from Earth to the moon. In Genesis, they appear in the phrase, sons of God, who came to Earth before the flood. In the oldest strata of Genesis, the term Elohim itself is grammatically plural, and several passages, including Genesis 1:26, use unexplained first-person plural language. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. The plural is never explained. The ancient textual tradition preserved in Enoch treats it as a literal reference to a council. The beings on the Saqqara block are Babylonian Anunnaki, are Enochian Watchers, are the Elohim of Genesis. 4 vocabularies. 1 description. Beings present before the age of human counting, with technical knowledge of celestial mechanics exceeding what any naturally evolved civilization should possess, who participated in the placement of the moon at a distance calibrated to produce a perfect geometric correspondence to the sun as observed from Earth. The compound glyph on JE 89289, those who came before the counting of years, is not theology, it is a timestamp. They were present before the calendar began, before the age of human measurement, before the first dynasty of Egypt, before the oldest ritual complex at Göbekli Tepe. They were present before the counting, which means they were present during the arrangement, during the time when the lesser light was positioned. The Anzu fragment, if it survives in any recoverable form, would be the oldest direct record of that moment. Woolley's 1924 photograph shows a clay tablet dense with cuneiform in a script older than the civilization it was buried inside. The sentence Spicer wrote in the margin of his 1,938 translation notes reads, "If this date is correct, it has already been set." What date? The astronomical configuration described in the surviving portions of Spicer's partial translation depicts a celestial alignment involving the moon and the sun at a specific positional relationship to Earth that his diagrams suggest. He was trying to date backward to a moment in history. The phrase, "it has already been set," implies he concluded that the event being described had occurred before human record, before the counting of years. That is the convergence point. All four records point to the same moment, before human history. After Earth's formation, the moon was positioned, the geometry was set. And four ancient civilizations, writing in four different languages, each arrived at the same explanation when they looked up at the same sky. They also agree on one more thing: those who placed it left a mark. The Maria, the dark plains on the moon's surface that ancient cultures worldwide described as script, as a face, as deliberate markings, are not geological features to them. They are a signature, left visible from Earth's surface. Readable, if you know the language. JE 89289 is still in the Cairo Museum basement. The Anzu fragment photograph sits in an archive captioned, "Not for reproduction." The Gaze manuscripts at Axum remain behind church walls with limited outside access. Spicer's translation notes sit in a folder labeled Miscellaneous Correspondence at the Oriental Institute in Chicago. The permits to excavate anomaly G7, the subsurface void, identified by ground-penetrating radar beneath the Giza Plateau, sitting directly on the route described in Hammamet inscription, 87, have been pending since 2018. The records are not gone. They are not destroyed. They are filed under the wrong labels, sitting in the wrong folders, waiting in basement storage, cataloged as decorative funerary art when the field notes say something entirely different. The moon rises tonight exactly as large as the Sunday. Exactly, not approximately. Exactly. And four ancient civilizations, writing in four different languages, at four different times, each independently arrived at the same explanation for why. They all say, "Someone put it there." If this investigation is the kind of content you want more of, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Every week on this channel we go directly to the catalog numbers, the field archives, the suppressed translations, and the raw data that mainstream sources never connect. The hieroglyphs are not mythology. The cuneiform is not legend. The Aramaic fragments are not allegory. They are documentation, and we read them that way. There is a limestone block in Cairo that has not been on public display in 5 decades. There is a clay tablet photographed in 1924 with a caption that says, "Not for reproduction." There is a folder of translation notes at the Oriental Institute sitting under a label designed to make it hard to find. And beneath the oldest monument complex on Earth, a sealed subterranean void sits waiting for excavation permits that have been pending for 6 years. The information is there. It is just filed where most people never look.